One cold October evening, Elise Walker pulled her scarf tightly around her neck as she made her way home from a late shift at the hospital. It had been a long, exhausting day, and her mind was lost in a fog of exhaustion when she heard the soft, persistent sound of mewing. She glanced down to see a tiny, shivering kitten with wild, silver fur and intense gleaming eyes following her every step. At first, she kept walking, assuming the tiny creature would find its way home. But after a few blocks, the kitten was still behind her, eyes bright and pleading. Elise's heart melted. Despite how tired she was, there was just something about this kitten that made her break out in a smile. "Oh, all right," she muttered, crouching down. "Are you lost, little one?" The kitten responded by purring and walking between her ankles, rubbing its face on her shoes. Elise reached down and petted its rough fur. She immediately noticed that the kitten was thin and clearly neglected. As Elise straightened up, turning around in each direction, she noticed that no houses seemed to be nearby. Hesitating, she decided to carry it back to her apartment. The moment she got inside, the kitten made itself at home, curling up on her favorite chair and purring as if she had lived there its whole life. Elise couldn't help but burst out laughing as she had set her bag down. "Looks like you've chosen me, haven't you?" As days turned into weeks, it became difficult to believe that Elise and the kitten had not been together prior to 2 weeks ago. The kitten seemed to thrive in Elise's cozy apartment, claiming every part of the house as his own. Elise named the kitten Thor because of his bold spirit and the fact that the kitten's tiny frame didn't match the name. He quickly grew fond of curling up beside her while she read or watched TV, purring like a small engine. While everything was perfect with her new kitten, Elise suspected something about her new pet was unusual. Thor was growing at an alarming rate, much faster than Elise expected. After a month, he was larger than any ordinary house cat, and his body became sleek and muscular. His coat took a wild, almost exotic sheen, with silvery tufts along his ears and a long, bushy tail. Neighbors who came to visit would always comment on his unique look or ask if she'd adopted him from some exotic pet shop. Elise would laugh it off, replying, "Oh, he just showed up one day. The little guy adopted me." But beneath her cheerful replies, Elise was stumped. She'd grown up with cats. None of them had looked anything like Thor. Soon, Elise began to notice other peculiar things about her new pet. Thor wasn't particularly friendly with strangers. She noticed he was fond of disappearing the moment a visitor came into the house, only reappearing after they left. Soon, Elise also started to notice he had a strange habit of slipping out at night, returning hours later with a satisfied expression, his fur smelling faintly of the outdoors. One night, Elise returned from a late-night shift to find her neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, standing in the hallway and her hands on her hips. "Your cat," she huffed, "was on my roof last night, scaring my poor dog half to death." Elise apologized, though she secretly found it amusing. She couldn't imagine little Thor, though not so little anymore, scaring Mrs. Hargrove's large dog. As the weeks went by, Thor's growth rate became even more impressive. By winter, he was nearly twice the size of the average house cat, with strong, sleek limbs and large, intense amber eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. While the cat looked majestic, Elise started to wonder if she'd misjudged the kitten's origins. What if he was a rare breed she hadn't heard of? As she was lost in her thoughts, Thor climbed to the couch and made a comfortable space for himself in between her hands, and for that moment, she forgot all about the origins of her beautiful pet. One late night in December, Elise had just settled into bed when she heard a strange noise outside her bedroom door. At first, she brushed it off as Thor knocking over something in the living room, but then she heard the sound again, and this time louder, accompanied by whispers and the faint creak of the floorboards. Her heart pounded. Someone was in her apartment. Elise sat up in bed, her nerves on edge. She had a moment of panic, unsure what to do, when suddenly there was a low, guttural growl from the living room. It was so menacing, so foreign, that Elise almost didn't recognize it was coming from Thor. The whispers stopped. There was a sound of shuffling, and then a loud crash, as if something heavy had been knocked over. In the dim light under her door, Elise saw shadowy shapes trying to run, followed by another chilling growl and a yelp of pain. Unable to stay still any longer, Elise crept toward the door and peeked out. Her living room was a blur of motion. Thor, her sweet, purring Thor, was not the cute bundle of fur she knew anymore. He had been transformed into a creature of raw fury, his silver fur standing with his fangs bared. One of the intruders was on the ground, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. The other two were backing away, terror etched on their faces. "Let's get out of here," one of them shouted, scrambling for the door. Thor lunged, his powerful body moving with a speed and grace that took Elise's breath away. He leaped at the second intruder, who let out a strangled scream as Thor clawed at his jacket, sending him tumbling backwards. The third man didn't wait. He bolted for the door, nearly tripping over his own feet in his desperation to escape. As the last man fled, Elise quickly dialed 911. Breathless with shock, she barely managed to explain what had happened before officers were on their way. The intruders, now bloodied and terrified, were caught by the police in the building's hallway, one of them muttering about some kind of wild animal inside her apartment. Once the police had taken the men away, an officer approached Elise, his expression a mixture of confusion and amazement. "Ma'am, we'd like to take a look at that cat of yours, if you don't mind." "Thor?" she asked. Elise glanced at Thor, who was back to his usual self, licking his paws calmly on the couch as if nothing had happened. She felt a strange pang of pride and curiosity. The officer bent down, studying Thor's features, and after a moment, he shook his head. "This isn't any ordinary cat, ma'am. This looks like a lynx." Elise's eyes widened. A lynx? Surely not. But she immediately remembered her thoughts on Thor's fast growth rate, his long, muscular frame, his powerful legs, his amber eyes that gleamed with a wild intelligence. She couldn't deny the resemblance. The officer continued, "It's rare, but sometimes wild animals are domesticated without people even realizing what they have. But a lynx in a city apartment? Ma'am, you have yourself a wild one here." Over the next few days, Elise's story spread, becoming the talk of her neighborhood and even making it into a local newspaper. Everyone was captivated by the tale of the mysterious kitten that had saved her from intruders. Some even started calling her apartment the Lynx Lair. But as much as Elise adored Thor, the authorities made it clear that keeping a wild animal in her home wasn't safe. Wildlife officials visited her apartment, observing Thor and gently explaining that despite his bond with her, he would be happier and healthier living in a natural habitat. On a cold, clear morning, Elise found herself standing outside a wildlife sanctuary, her heart aching as she said goodbye. Thor nuzzled her hand, purring softly as if sensing her sadness. A sanctuary worker reassured her, saying, "He'll be safe here, and he'll have space to roam just like he would in the wild." Elise nodded, though she could do little to stop the tears from falling from her eyes. "Take care of him. He's special." Months passed, and though Elise missed Thor terribly, she found comfort in the occasional updates from the sanctuary. They told her how he had adjusted well, forming bonds with other lynxes and thriving in his new environment. In the end, she was grateful for the incredible, fleeting adventure they'd shared. Elise had loved many pets, but she knew she would never meet another like Thor, a creature of wild spirit and fierce loyalty, who had protected her when she needed it most.